The wind howled through the pine-covered hills of Pine Grove Valley, its sharp breath carrying memories too bitter to name. Noah Keller kept his head low as he walked up the narrow trail behind his old cabin, the same path he'd cleared every winter since he'd bought the place, back when hope still lived in the corners of his smile. It was late February. The snow was stubborn this year, refusing to melt even as the days stretched longer. The kind that clung to branches like grief too old to shake. Noah didn't mind the cold. He preferred it, really. The silence, the stillness. It made sense, unlike the chaos that had wrecked his life 3 winters ago. He adjusted the collar of his flannel jacket, thick with wear and years, and paused beside the old woodpile. His fingers, rough from years of carpentry, brushed over the axe handle. He wasn't in a hurry. He rarely was anymore. Inside, his son Eli, 12, quiet, observant, was probably sketching something again. The boy rarely spoke unless it mattered. Noah respected that. There was a time he used to fill every silence, but now he had learned. Some things grow better in the quiet. He split a log, then another. The rhythm helped. One swing, one breath. The ache in his shoulders reminded him he was still alive. That had to count for something. They had a routine, him and Eli. Oatmeal in the morning. Homeschool lessons before lunch. Afternoons spent restoring furniture for side income, salvaged from estate sales or discarded by the roadside. Some men built homes. Noah rebuilt broken things, but he never touched the piano in the corner of their living room. That belonged to Lila. He still remembered the way her hands moved over the keys like they were made of light. She had taught music at the high school before the cancer arrived, like an uninvited guest, and stayed far too long. When she passed, something inside Noah had cracked in silence. He didn't weep at the funeral, didn't scream into the wind. He just stopped playing. And Eli stopped drawing anything with faces. For 3 years, they lived like that, side by side, father and son, quiet and quieter. That morning, as Noah set the axe down and brushed snow from his boots, he noticed the sound first. Not the wind, not the birds. Something else. Coughing. Ragged. Strained. Human. He turned toward the road at the bottom of the hill, heart instinctively tightening. His boots crunched over the ice-packed gravel as he approached the source. A figure staggered into view. A woman, thin as smoke, wrapped in a threadbare coat that looked too old to be warm. Behind her, 2 children trudged close, their faces pinched from cold and hunger. Noah blinked, unsure if he was hallucinating. Strangers didn't just appear out here, not in the dead of winter, not unless they were running from something. The woman collapsed to her knees near the broken fence that lined his property. One of the kids, a girl of maybe 9, tried to lift her, her hands bare and trembling. The boy, a few years older, stepped in front of her like a shield. Noah didn't hesitate. "Hey!" he called, jogging forward. "It's okay. I've got you." The woman looked up, dazed, lips cracked from cold. "Please," she rasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go." Her eyes fluttered closed. Noah caught her before she hit the ground. 20 minutes later, the fire roared in the living room. The woman lay on the couch wrapped in Eli's extra quilt, her cheeks slowly regaining color. The kids huddled near the stove, sipping the lukewarm cocoa Noah had managed to stir together while his heart still raced. Eli watched them from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed not in suspicion but in calculation. He was always measuring, always reading the room like a book he didn't trust yet. "What's your name?" Noah asked the older boy, kneeling beside the couch. "Micah," he answered after a long pause. His voice was low, polite. "She's my mom. Her name's Rachel, and that's Ivy." "Ivy," the little girl echoed, her eyes big as saucers. Noah nodded. "You're safe here. You're not in trouble." Micah's lips twitched. "We never really get in trouble," he said softly. "We just get left behind." The words settled, like dust in Noah's chest. He stood up and glanced at Eli, who met his gaze without flinching. They didn't need to speak. Something was about to change, and deep down, Noah knew. He hadn't just opened his door to strangers. He'd opened it to the next chapter of his life. The cabin had never felt full before. Noah Keller had built it himself years ago, when he and Layla had dreamed of raising Eli away from city noise. A sturdy pine frame house nestled against the foothills, with wide windows and a fireplace that cracked like old records. But now, with 2 extra kids dozing on the couch and a half-conscious woman tucked under blankets, the space felt heavier. Not in a bad way, just unfamiliar. Noah stood at the kitchen counter, spooning soup into mismatched mugs, not bowls. He figured it was easier for small hands to hold warm things with handles. Steam curled up into the silence, mixing with the scent of rosemary and lentils. He hadn't planned to cook for 5, but he hadn't planned for a lot of things lately. Behind him, the fire hummed, steady and low. Eli sat on the floor by the hearth, his sketch pad closed but nearby. He watched the girl, Ivy, as she stirred the cocoa Noah had given her. Her fingers were still pink with cold, her eyes drifting from object to object as if memorizing the room. Micah hadn't moved since the woman, Rachel, had passed out. He sat beside her now, watching her chest rise and fall, slow but steady. His expression was locked in that dangerous middle space. Too old for his years, too young to give up. Noah handed him a mug of soup. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Micah nodded, almost robotic. "We've been walking for 2 days. Bus stopped running. She got dizzy last night, but said she just needed sleep." Noah didn't press. He recognized the tone, the voice of a kid who'd been forced to parent too soon. He used to hear it in Eli after Lila passed, tight words wrapped in too much control. "She have any medical history I should know?" he asked gently. Micah hesitated. "She has lupus and asthma, but it's the cold that gets her. We used to live in Georgia. This snow stuff." He trailed off, eyes flicking to the frosted windows. Noah reached into the cupboard and grabbed the small bottle of albuterol he kept for Eli's rare attacks. He didn't say anything, just placed it on the coffee table within reach. Micah noticed, nodded again. That one wasn't robotic. That one meant, "Thank you." Rachel woke sometime around dusk. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't sit up gasping. Her eyes just blinked open like someone waking from the kind of nap you didn't expect to survive. Noah was at the table with Eli, walking him through some multiplication problems. Ivy was curled up under the quilt with a picture book, her cocoa, long since emptied and forgotten. Micah hadn't moved from her side. "Mom," he whispered. Rachel blinked. Her voice came in fragments. "Where?" "You're safe," Micah said softly. "He brought us here." She turned her head slightly, her eyes finding Noah's. Something flickered there, fear, shame, then relief. She tried to sit up, winced, and Noah crossed the room with quiet speed. "Take it easy," he said. "You're warm now. We'll keep it that way." "I'm sorry," she murmured. "We didn't mean to trespass. I couldn't keep walking." "You didn't trespass," he said, firm but kind. "You survived. That's different." She looked at him for a long moment, and something softened in her shoulders. Then she saw Ivy. "Baby, are you okay?" Ivy popped her head out from the quilt. "We got Coco," she announced. "And there's a real fire. And a cat. I named it Pancake." Noah raised an eyebrow. "We don't have a—" "Might have been a raccoon," Eli offered without looking. Up from his math. Rachel almost laughed, and the sound surprised even her. "I should have asked," she said, "before collapsing on your couch." "You should have asked sooner," Noah replied, then immediately winced. I didn't mean—" But Rachel waved him off. "You're not wrong," she said. She tried to sit up again, slower this time, and succeeded. The blanket slipped slightly, revealing the torn hem of her coat and bruises, not from injury but from exhaustion. Noah noticed, and he remembered Lila, in her last few months, draped in the same kind of quiet defeat. He turned toward the stove. "There's soup," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's hot." Rachel nodded once. "Thank you." And that was all. They ate in near silence. Rachel on the couch, holding her mug with both hands. The kids perched, around her, close as breath. Noah sat across the room, close enough to help if she tipped, far enough not to intrude. Eli brought her a second helping without being asked. She looked at him, and for a second her expression broke. A deep, fragile awe, like someone remembering what kindness felt like. Later, as the snow fell again outside, thick and soft as feathers, Rachel leaned her head back against the cushion. "I'll find us a shelter by morning," she whispered. "You've done enough. I won't take more than—" "You're not taking," Noah interrupted. "You're staying. At least until you're strong enough to say that sentence without passing out." Rachel blinked. "Why?" He looked at— The next morning broke with the pale blue light of a snow-muted dawn, the kind that seemed to pause time itself. No traffic sounds, no barking dogs, just the quiet hush of a world wrapped in frost. Noah stood in the kitchen, staring out the window, above the sink. He held a chipped navy mug in both hands, steam rising from his coffee. He hadn't slept much. Not because he was worried about the strangers in his house, but because something about their presence had stirred the dust off. Parts of him he hadn't touched in years. Behind him, the cabin began to wake. Ivy's soft giggles echoed first, followed by the creak of the old floorboards as Micah tiptoed down the hall. Then Eli, already dressed, slid into the kitchen silently, picking up the dish towel from its hook and folding it into squares. Noah smiled faintly. That was Eli's version of small talk. "How long do you think they'll stay?" Eli asked after a moment. Noah turned to look at his son, his expression unreadable. "Long enough to get back on their feet," he said. "Maybe longer, if they need it." Eli nodded once. "They seem okay." "They're not okay," Noah said softly. "But they're trying. That counts." By noon, Rachel was sitting up without assistance, her skin less pale, though her voice remained thin and frayed. She refused to take up Noah's bedroom again, and instead curled up on the couch with an old quilt Lila had stitched years ago, a patchwork of faded concert T-shirts and baby onesies Eli had outgrown. Rachel traced the stitches with her fingers, as Ivy leaned against her side and told her everything about Pancake the raccoon cat, and how Eli had a bunk bed, and how the toaster here only worked if you turned it upside down first. Noah chuckled at that last part. He kept meaning to fix it. Micah sat at the table, flipping through one of Eli's sketchbooks with gentle curiosity. "You drew all these?" Eli shrugged. "Mostly. Some are old." "They're good," Micah said. "Better than I could ever do." "You fix things," Eli replied, glancing at the snow boots Micah had mended with duct tape and determination the night before. "That's kind of the same." Micah smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. Noah watched from the kitchen doorway. This house, which had known only grief and polite silence for years, now breathed with voices again. Laughter, complaints, hope in small, ordinary forms. It unnerved him and comforted him at the same time. That afternoon, Rachel insisted on helping. "I can cook," she said firmly, even as she leaned heavily on the counter. "Just don't let me fall in." Noah gave her a nod and passed her a carton of eggs. "Deal!" They moved around the kitchen in near rhythm. Rachel scrambled while he chopped vegetables, the occasional brush of elbows, a shared smile over Ivy's exaggerated stories. It felt like a memory from a life that wasn't his. When the frittata hit the cast-iron skillet and the aroma filled the room, Noah suddenly remembered Lila standing at that same stove, humming an old tune from the 1940s, something about spring and second chances. He hadn't heard that song in years. Rachel noticed the change in his face. "Was she a singer?" she asked gently. He nodded. Voice like silk. Played piano, too. "Do you still play?" Noah didn't answer. He just flipped the frittata and changed the subject. After lunch, Rachel dozed on the couch while the kids bundled up to explore the snowy hill out back. Ivy had never seen this much snow before and made it her personal mission to eat at least a pound of it. Micah built a lopsided snowman. Eli taught him how to shape better eyes using small pine cones. Laughter echoed through the woods like a sound the trees had forgotten. Noah stood at the top of the steps, watching. He felt a strange ache in his chest. Not pain, not longing. Something else. Rachel stirred awake and watched him from the couch. "They bring light with them," she said softly. Noah turned. "Yeah, they do." She folded her hands together, almost shy. "I'm sorry again, for just showing up like that. We didn't have anyone else. Not after—" She trailed off. "You don't have to explain," Noah said. "I've been on the edge of things too." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw the fatigue around his eyes wasn't from work. It was from holding too much in for too long. "You lost her here," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "In this room." She reached for the edge of the quilt and held it tighter. "I lost my husband in a hospital hallway," she said. Sudden cardiac arrest. The worst part wasn't the loss. It was what came after. The world didn't pause. It just kept moving. And I had to move with it. Noah sat down across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "I know that feeling." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. Ivy's laughter floated in through the walls. Somewhere outside, Eli yelled something that sounded suspiciously like, "Watch out!" and Rachel smiled. "They'll be okay, won't they?" "Yeah," Noah said. "And maybe we will, too." The snow lingered into the week like a guest that refused to leave, frosting every branch and fence post in crystal-white silence. But inside Noah's cabin, warmth had taken root. Not just from the firewood or blankets, but from presence. From the laughter that began to return in unguarded bursts, from the soft chatter that filled the space once ruled by long, aching pauses. Rachel moved more each day. Slowly, carefully, but with purpose. Her color returned. Her voice, though still weak at times, began to carry stories instead of apologies. On Thursday afternoon, she stepped into the hallway for the first time without support. Noah noticed from the workshop doorway, but didn't say anything. She had that look, one he recognized from his own grief days, like someone who wanted to claim a little piece of normal without an audience. Rachel passed the piano and paused. The cover was closed. Dust lingered on its edges. But something about the curve of the wood, the way it caught the light from the fireplace, made her step closer. She reached out and ran her fingers along the lid, then looked around to make sure no one saw. With a deep breath, she lifted the cover. The keys stared back, yellowed, and slightly out of tune, like they too were waiting for someone to remember their song. Rachel didn't play. Not yet. But she stood there for a long time. That night, as on Audrey, the kids slept, and the fire dimmed to coals, Rachel sat in the living room cradling something in her lap. A small wooden box with worn corners and hand-stitched fabric on the lid. Noah entered quietly, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He offered her one and sat across from her on the rug, like they had done it 100 times. "What's that?" he asked, gently. She ran her thumb along the edge of the box. "My quilt box," she said. "I've had it since I was 17. My mother gave it to me when I left for college. Told me to keep my joy stitched into something I could touch." Noah raised his eyebrows. "She was a poet?" "She was tired," Rachel replied, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "But she believed in beauty, even when it hurt." She opened the box slowly. Inside were bits of old fabric, scraps of memory, a floral handkerchief, a faded piece of denim with marker doodles, the corner of a baby's first blanket. Each square held a story, and she unfolded them like pages from a life too full to forget. "This one," she said, holding up a navy blue patch with gold thread, "was from the first pillow I made after Micah was born. I stitched his initials, but the thread was too thick, so it just looked like 2 confused snakes." Noah chuckled softly. "I like confused snakes." "This one," she continued, pulling out a pink plaid square, "was Ivy's first dress. She wore it to the hospital to meet her dad. He was so nervous. He was more scared of holding her than I was of giving birth." She paused at the last square, a pale cream piece with a faint musical note embroidered into the center. Noah leaned in. "What's that one?" Rachel hesitated. "It's the last thing he gave me. A scrap from his favorite shirt. He wore it the night he played our song on stage. It wasn't fancy, just a coffee shop open mic. But it was the first time I ever saw him play, without fear." Noah's voice came softer than a whisper. "What was the song?" She didn't answer at first. Her fingers traced the musical note slowly, as if coaxing it back to life. Then she hummed. Just 2 bars. It wasn't much. The melody wobbled. Her voice broke. But Noah knew. He knew. It was the first time she'd sung since her husband died. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just sat beside her. Not touching. Not prying. Just being there. Rachel wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "I promised him I'd finish the quilt when I found the next song." Noah looked at the fireplace, where the shadows danced like old friends. "Maybe it's time." The next morning, Rachel asked if she could use the sewing machine Noah kept in the hall closet, the one that hadn't seen daylight since Lila tried, and failed, to make Halloween costumes when Eli was 4. He set it up on the dining table, without a word. For the next 3 days, Rachel worked quietly, cutting, stitching, humming when she thought no one was listening. Micah helped thread the needles. Ivy handed her scraps with names she invented on the spot. Eli offered one of his old sketch pages, something he'd drawn when he thought his mother's memory would disappear if he didn't keep her on paper. Rachel added it all. Noah watched from the sidelines, heart tugged in a way he didn't have. Language 4. This woman, who had arrived as a shadow, was stitching her soul back together, one thread at a time. And his home, it didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like it was breathing again. By Sunday, the quilt was done. It wasn't perfect. A few stitches wandered. The corners didn't line up exactly, but it was beautiful and warm and honest. Rachel held it up in the living room, standing in the soft morning light. The kids gathered around her like petals around a stem. Noah stepped forward, fingers brushing one of the musical notes stitched near the top corner. "This," he said, voice thick, "isn't just a quilt." Rachel nodded. "It's a promise." He looked at her. "To who?" She met his eyes. "To whoever's listening." The first real thaw came the following Wednesday. A slow drip of melting snow tapped against the eaves. Icicles snapped loose one by one, falling like glass from the cabin's edge. Noah stood on the front porch with a mug of coffee, boots wet, with slush, watching steam rise from the earth like it was exhaling after holding its breath all winter. Behind him, the house was quieter than usual. Not silent, but still. Eli had gone with Micah and Ivy to the frozen pond just past the woods, bringing an old sled Noah had patched together from scrap wood. Rachel had stayed behind, curled on the couch with her notebook, one she hadn't opened in years. It was leather-bound, worn soft around the edges, and carried the scent of dust and lavender. She'd told Noah it was for music once, songs she and her husband had written together. He hadn't asked to read it, but he noticed the way she held it, like something sacred, like a memory that might vanish if opened too quickly. That morning, as he chopped wood near the shed, Rachel approached. She didn't say much, just stood quietly until he looked up. "I want to tell you something," she said. He set the axe down. "Okay." She didn't sit, didn't fidget, just let the words come, slow and fragile. "I used to think grief was the end of something, like a door slamming shut that you couldn't reopen. But it's not. It's a hallway. And some days you can walk. Other days, you crawl." Noah nodded gently. "Some days you just lie on the floor and stare at the ceiling." She gave a ghost of a smile. "Exactly." A pause passed between them, full but not heavy. Then she said it. "He wasn't just my husband. He was my music. Every lyric I wrote, every chord I ever found. It was built around him. And when he died, I couldn't hear anything anymore." Noah's heart ached, not in pity, but in recognition. Rachel's voice cracked. "But lately, when Ivy laughs, when Micah hums to himself while fixing something, when Eli sketches by the window, I hear it again. Faint, wobbly, but it's there." Noah didn't speak. He knew this moment didn't need fixing. It needed witnessing. Rachel opened her notebook and carefully tore out a single page. "This was the last song we wrote together," she said, "unfinished." She folded the page and offered it to him. He hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I can't finish it without someone who understands silence." Noah brought it inside that night and laid it on the kitchen table beneath the soft glow of the old pendant lamp. The page was handwritten, his eyes instantly catching the trembling notes and smudged pencil markings. There were verses about morning fog, A house full of echoes, a girl who refused to speak but never stopped listening. But the chorus was blank, empty, waiting. He stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up a pencil. He didn't finish the whole song. Just one line, enough to give it breath again. Later that evening, Rachel padded into the kitchen in thick socks, the hem of her borrowed sweater brushing her thighs. Her eyes found the paper. She read the line. "I don't need loud to feel heard," it said. "I just need someone to stay when it's quiet." Her hand trembled slightly. That's it." He glanced up. "It's a start." Her eyes brimmed. "It's more than a start." She sat down across from him, folding her hands on the table, and looked around the room like she was seeing it differently. "I think we were meant to land here," she whispered. "Not forever. Maybe just for a chapter. But this chapter matters." Noah exhaled, eyes soft. Sometimes the chapters we didn't plan are the ones that teach us how to breathe again. In the corner of the room, the piano waited, still untouched. Rachel turned her head toward it. "Do you think it still plays?" she asked. Noah stood, walked to the bench, and lifted the lid. He pressed a key. It rang out, a little flat, but true. She crossed the room slowly. Then, for the first time, sat down at the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys like she was meeting an old friend she didn't know how to greet anymore. She played one note, then another. It wasn't a song yet, just fragments, threads of something that wanted to be remembered. And in the middle of it, Noah reached for his guitar, dusty, half-tuned, leaning against the wall, and added 2 chords beneath her. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't even a rehearsal. It was a conversation, and somehow they both knew. The silence was ending. The snow was nearly gone by Friday afternoon, leaving behind a patchwork of thawing mud and stubborn ice. The ground squished under Eli's boots as he helped Micah drag the old wagon up the hill behind the cabin, loaded with pine cones and the remnants of snowmen lost to time. Ivy skipped behind them, wrapped in Eli's too big scarf, humming something that didn't quite have words, but carried a familiar rhythm. It was the kind of sound children made when they forgot someone might be listening, a melody carried from heart to lips without filter. Inside the cabin, Rachel sat at the piano again. Her fingers were steadier now, her posture more certain. She wasn't trying to play perfectly. She was trying to remember. She tapped out simple progressions, each note ringing like a knock on a door she hadn't dared open in years. Noah was at the table, sanding down an old jewelry box that had belonged to Lila. The varnish had worn thin, and the lid stuck slightly when it closed. He wasn't fixing it to sell, he just wanted it to feel useful again. He glanced over at Rachel. "You're playing longer," she smiled faintly. "My hands stopped shaking this morning." Noah set down the sandpaper. "That's something." There was a pause. Then Rachel looked at him and asked, "Do you think they know?" "Who?" "The kids. Do you think they know they're healing us?" Noah leaned back in his chair. "I think they feel it, in the way the house sounds different. Now, in how the silence used to echo. But now, it settles." Rachel turned back to the piano and began playing something new, slow and searching, a series of chords she hadn't touched in years. "Do you remember the song we started?" she asked. Noah nodded and retrieved the folded paper from the shelf. He handed it to her without a word. She studied the single line he'd added earlier that week. Her fingers hovered above the keys. "I think I found the melody," she said softly. Noah picked up his guitar. "Then let's follow it." They worked, on it for hours, on and off, never forcing it, just letting the chords come when they wanted to. Micah wandered in first, wiping dirt off his hands. He paused at the doorway, watching Rachel and Noah silently communicate through key and chord. He didn't say anything, just sat down at the far end of the couch and listened. Ivy arrived next, cheeks flushed, hair tangled with wind. She twirled, once in the middle of the room before plopping beside her brother and laying her head on his shoulder. Then Eli entered, carrying the sketch pad he'd taken outside. He looked at the piano, then the guitar, then the quilt folded neatly across the louis, back of the couch. He didn't ask what they were doing. He just took a seat on the rug in front of the fire. No one planned it. No one announced anything. But in that moment, they were a family gathered, stitched together not by blood, but by music, memory, and the soft thread of second chances. Rachel started playing again, slower this time, more complete. Noah followed, and then, unexpectedly, Ivy sang, just one line. Quiet, slightly off-key, but brave. Micah turned toward her in shock, then looked at Rachel. Was that the verse? Rachel smiled. Close enough. Micah cleared his throat. I could try the next line? Rachel played the progression again. Micah sang, sturdy, unsure. Then Eli, without looking up, added a soft harmony. Just one note behind. No one looked at him. No one made it a big deal. That's how Eli needed it. Noah's throat tightened. He kept strumming. Rachel's voice entered last. Steady. Low. A mother's lullaby wrapped in a widow's second wind. They didn't finish the song that day, but they didn't need to, because something more important had happened. They'd found a sound that belonged to all of them, a sound that hadn't existed before they came together. After dinner, the living room became a quilt of pillows, cocoa mugs, and half-finished conversations. Micah was trying to teach Ivy the chorus again, but she kept adding her own words. Eli sat cross-legged, doodling tiny music notes into the margin of his sketch pad. Rachel stood at the window, looking out at the U, clearing beyond the cabin. Noah approached quietly, standing beside her. You hear it? She asked. Hear what? The quiet. It's different now. Before, it used to feel heavy. But now, it feels full. Noah nodded. It's the sound of something growing. She looked at him, her eyes soft. I'm scared of leaving it. You're not leaving, he said gently. You're changing. That's different. She looked back out the window. But what if I lose this again? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wooden guitar pick, faded, slightly chipped, but still smooth along the edges. This was Lila's, he said. I've carried it for 3 years, not because I needed it to play, but because I didn't know how to let her go. Rachel looked at it, her breath catching. She would have liked you, he added. Not because you play piano, but because you don't pretend. Rachel reached out and touched the pick gently. Noah placed it in her hand. You're allowed to hold more than one chapter, he said. Later that night, long after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel unfolded her music notebook and titled the song. They were writing together. She wrote 4 words, the sound between us. And in that moment, she knew. Whatever came next, she wasn't walking through it alone. It was Saturday morning when Rachel finally said she needed to go into town. Not for anything dramatic, just essentials. Bread, cough syrup, a notebook for Ivy, who had begun writing her official songs with crayon. But Noah knew it wasn't just about groceries. It was about stepping into a world she'd been hiding from. He offered to drive, and she didn't argue. Micah and Eli stayed back to stack firewood. Micah eager to prove something, Eli content to do things that didn't require words. Ivy promised not to eat more than 1 scoop of snow, which no one believed, but she was firm in her pinky swear. As they pulled onto the old road leading into Pine Grove town proper, Rachel grew quieter. She wore her coat zipped all the way up, hands shoved deep into her sleeves. Noah glanced over once but didn't push. He'd learned some silences weren't meant to be interrupted. They were meant to be honored. The town hadn't changed much in the last 5 years. The gas station still leaned slightly to the left. The diner still had the same chalkboard menu out front, boasting pecan pie that might save your soul. The grocery store still had that worn bell above the door that jingled like a sigh. But for Rachel, it might as well have been another planet. She walked beside Noah, head down, every step uncertain. She hadn't been in a store, any store, since her husband died, not without anxiety buzzing beneath her ribs. The noise, the carts, the fluorescent lights, the overwhelming sense of being seen when you felt completely invisible. She gripped the shopping list tighter. "You okay?" Noah asked softly. Rachel forced a smile. "Getting there." They started slow. Apples, oatmeal, a box of tea Eli liked. Noah gently pointed things out. She nodded, followed, kept breathing. Then came the pharmacy aisle. Rachel reached for the cough syrup. A voice spoke behind her. "Rachel? Rachel Clark?" She froze. Noah turned instinctively. The voice belonged to a woman, early 50s, pearl earrings, styled hair, and a tone so sweet it could bruise fruit. Her name tag read, Melinda, Volunteer Coordinator. Rachel's fingers tensed around the box. "Oh my goodness," Melinda continued, hand fluttering to her chest. "I thought you moved away after, well, you know, such a tragedy. And with 2 kids. You poor thing." Rachel didn't respond. Melinda tilted her head. "Are you staying around here now? We heard rumors." Noah stepped forward. "We're just picking up groceries." Melinda blinked, surprised. "And you are?" Someone who doesn't like rumors. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, the way polite people pretend they didn't take offense. "Well, we're always praying for you, dear," she said to Rachel with a tight smile. "You look strong, all things considered." Rachel said nothing. Melinda walked away, her heels tapping against the tile like a punctuation mark no one asked for. Rachel didn't cry until they reached the truck. She gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles before even turning the key, her shoulders hunched, her breath uneven. Not sobs, not weeping, just a deep tremble from somewhere that hadn't thawed yet. "I didn't expect to feel it again," she whispered. "The grief, the judgment, the way people wrap pity in politeness and call it kindness." Noah didn't say anything. He just waited. Rachel let the silence hold her for a minute. "I wasn't ashamed until they told me I should be," she said. "For not moving fast enough, for not smiling at the church bake sale, for not pretending I was okay so their discomfort wouldn't show." Noah looked out at the parking lot. "You don't owe anyone your healing." She turned toward him. "Then why does it still hurt?" He met her eyes. "Because you're real." Or they didn't go home right away. Instead, Noah took a detour. He drove them to the overlook just past Maple Creek Road, where the hills opened up wide and the pine trees leaned like old friends trading secrets. He parked the truck, left it running, and opened the glove box. He pulled out the lyrics they'd been working on. The sound between us. Rachel looked at them. You brought that with you? I bring it everywhere now. She gave him a look that was half tease, half tears. Then he reached for his guitar from the back seat. Let's sing it here, he said. Rachel blinked. You mean in the parking lot? Why not? No audience, no stage, just sky. She hesitated, then, without another word, opened her notebook. The song came out rough. She missed a note. He fumbled a chord. The wind stole half the second verse. But they laughed. Genuinely. Because it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be theirs. When they finished, they sat in the cab of the truck for a long time, neither speaking. Rachel looked out over the valley and whispered, I want to record it. Noah turned to her, surprised. Not for the world, she clarified. Not yet. Just for us, for the kids, for something to keep when things get hard again. Noah nodded. Then we'll make it real. That night, Rachel handed Micah a flyer she found tacked to the bulletin board outside the store. It was wrinkled and half faded, but he smoothed it out and read it aloud. Winter Showcase. Submissions open for family and original performances. He looked up, eyes wide. We're doing this? He asked. Rachel smiled. We're not ready for the stage. Micah tilted his head. But maybe the stage is ready for us. The dining table was cleared by sunrise. No more cereal bowls or stacks of worksheets. Just a laptop, an old condenser mic, and a web of cables borrowed from Noah's shed, most of which hadn't seen daylight in 5 years. Rachel stood beside. The setup, sleeves rolled, notebook in hand, eyes fixed on the screen like it might bite. This feels like a spaceship, she muttered. Noah grinned from across the table. I'm pretty sure one of those wires belonged to Eli's science project last year. If we lift off, just follow my lead. Micah laughed from the floor where he was setting up pillows for sound dampening. We're seriously doing this? We're seriously doing this, Rachel echoed, quieter. Ivy crawled under the table and popped out the other side like a magician. Can we do one where I sing the harmony with a whisper? Like this? She hummed a single note with exaggerated mystery. Everyone clapped. Eli sat nearby, watching them. He didn't say much, but when Rachel looked at him and raised an eyebrow, he nodded once. He was in. The plan was simple. They'd record the sound between us, with just the basics. Rachel on piano, Noah on guitar, and the kids blending in for the chorus. Nothing fancy. Just a keepsake. Something that lived outside their memories. But music has a way of testing your heart before it gives you the moment. The first take started strong. Rachel's hands hit the keys like old friends reuniting. Noah's guitar was warm, steady, a soft frame around her chords. The children's voices, tentative but whole, rose like new branches on an old tree. Then came the third verse. Rachel hit a wrong chord. It wasn't much, a single note out of place, but it startled her. She stopped playing mid-line, hands frozen above the keys. I'm sorry, she said quickly. My fault. She shook her head, stood, and backed. Away from the piano, Noah rested his guitar on his knee. It's okay. We'll start over. I need a minute, Rachel muttered, disappearing into the hallway. Micah looked at the others. She never messes up that part. It's like muscle memory. Eli quietly stood and followed her without being asked. He found her in the back bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. I practiced, she whispered. Every night while you were asleep, I could play that verse in my dreams." Eli didn't speak. He just sat beside her. "I think I got scared," she admitted. "Not of the song, of finishing it. Like, if we record it, it becomes real. And then, if we lose it—" She trailed off. Eli looked at her, then reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Rachel opened it slowly. It was a sketch of their family. Not perfect, not shaded, not polished. Just lines. Rachel at the piano. Noah with his guitar. Ivy laughing. Micah holding the mic. Eli himself sitting cross-legged with his sketch pad. At the bottom, he had written, "We won't lose it. We're living it." Rachel's breath caught. "You're a better lyricist than me," she whispered. Eli gave her a small smile. Back in the living room, they tried again. This time, Rachel breathed deeper before starting. Noah kept his eyes on her fingers, sinking, with every chord change, like he was tethered to her rhythm. Micah counted them in softly. 3, 2, Rachel began. The intro floated, unforced. The verses came, quiet and steady. Ivy swayed slightly on her heels, humming along even when she wasn't singing. Eli nodded, mouthing the words instead of speaking them. Then came the third verse. Rachel's fingers hesitated, then moved forward. No stumble, no crack, just sound. Noah strummed the bridge. Micah and Ivy joined in. "We don't need loud to be heard, just a heart that stays through silence." Rachel finished the last line. Noah let the guitar echo a final chord, and in that moment, none of them moved. They didn't cheer, didn't clap. They just sat in it. A silence not born of fear, but of reverence. They listened to the playback together. It wasn't perfect. Rachel's voice shook slightly in the second chorus. Ivy came in early once. The mic picked up the sound of Micah adjusting his sweater. But none of that mattered, because it was true. It was theirs, and it sang like a family finding its shape. That night, Rachel placed the recording on a USB drive and labeled it in blue pen. "For the days we forget." She gave a second copy to Noah. "I want us to have this," she said, "in case anything ever tries to convince us we imagined it." Noah looked at her for a long moment. "You ever think you were meant to walk into my woods that day?" he asked. Rachel tilted her head. "You mean collapse in front of your fence like a stray?" "I mean save us both," he said. She didn't answer. But the way she smiled said everything. The morning after they finished the recording, the house felt lighter. Noah noticed it first when he stepped onto the porch. The frost was melting fast, revealing hints of muddy earth and the first brave green shoots poking through the soil. He closed his eyes and listened, not just to the birds, but to the feeling. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. Inside, Ivy danced barefoot in the living room, holding the USB stick like a trophy. "We made a song," she declared dramatically. "A real one, with verses and everything." Micah grinned, sliding scrambled eggs onto her plate. "It wasn't even bad." "It was great," Ivy corrected, pointing a fork at him. "And we should play it for someone." Eli, already halfway, threw his toast, lifted a small flyer, and pushed it toward the middle of the table. "The Winter Showcase." Rachel picked it up, still groggy in her cardigan and messy bun. "Submissions due Sunday," she read aloud. "We're not ready for a stage," Noah said, sipping his coffee. Rachel looked at him. "Who said anything about a stage?" He raised an eyebrow. She smirked. "You're the one who keeps saying this house is full of music again. So maybe it's time someone else hears it." Micah looked at her. Like, actually submit the song? Rachel nodded slowly. Just the audio. No lights, no audience. Just a sound that belongs to us. They all turned to Noah, waiting for the veto, but he only said, "Let's do it." The submission form was simple. A name, a title, a few check boxes. But when it came to group or act name, they hesitated. The Keller Clark Kids, Ivy offered. Sounds like a band of superheroes. Sounds like a tax firm, Noah muttered. What about something from the song? Micah asked. Like a lyric. Rachel looked at the USB stick still sitting on the mantel, then smiled. The sound between us, it was. They hit submit and forgot about it. At least, they tried to. 2 days later, while Noah was restocking kindling and Rachel was folding laundry, the phone rang. Eli picked it up, his first real phone call in months. He listened, nodded, said okay, and handed the phone to Rachel. It's the coordinator. Rachel's eyes widened. Of the showcase? Eli nodded once. She wiped her hands on her jeans and took the phone. Hi, yes, this is Rachel Clark, she said, voice tight. Then her eyes widened. You what? Noah looked up from across the room. Rachel's mouth dropped open. You want us to perform? Live? Ivy squealed. Micah dropped the book he was holding. Rachel looked at Noah, panic setting in. They loved the recording, said it stood out for its raw authenticity and emotional impact. And now they want us to open the showcase. Noah stared. Open. Like, first. That night, everything changed. The recording wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It had become an invitation. And with that invitation came attention. The community message board lit up after the official event schedule went live. A local mom posted, "So heartwarming to see a struggling family finding their way again. Excited to hear more." A teacher chimed in, "Micah and Ivy? Sweet kids, glad to see them involved in something hopeful." But not every voice was kind. A man named Darren Fitch, who ran the local hardware store, commented, "Lots of people go through hard times. Doesn't mean they need to be paraded on stage like a charity case." Another reply, "Pretty sure that song's only popular because it tugs at sympathy." What happened to real talent? Rachel saw the thread and turned her laptop screen off. Micah stood behind her. "You saw it too?" she asked. He nodded, jaw tight. Rachel reached for his hand. "We don't sing to prove anything, Micah. We sing because we survived." The days leading up to the performance were a blur. Ivy practiced on the living room stage, stacking books like speakers and bowing after every imaginary standing ovation. Eli sketched them in rehearsal poses. Micah worked on a simple lighting cue, just dimming the living room lamp at the right moment. Rachel and Noah ran through the song each night. Not over-rehearsing, just remembering the way their voices moved together. But the nerves were real. Every time Rachel stood at the piano, her breath caught. Not from fear of the song, but from the risk of being seen. "What if I freeze?" she asked Noah one evening. He looked at her. "Then we freeze together. And thaw together, too." The night before the showcase, the family gathered in the living room. They didn't rehearse. They didn't adjust cables or tune strings. They just sat, cross-legged, shoulder to shoulder, beneath the glow of the fireplace. Rachel looked at her children, at Eli's sketchbook resting on the coffee table, at Ivy curled up in her lap. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said softly, "we've already won." "Why?" Ivy asked, half asleep. Rachel kissed her forehead. "Because our silence became a song." The Pine Grove Community Center wasn't fancy. Its wooden stage still bore the scuff marks of Christmas plays and awkward wedding receptions. Folding chairs lined the room like soldiers, wobbly, mismatched, but sincere. A cluster of paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, swaying gently with every movement in the room. There were no curtains, no spotlight, just a warmth that came from people who had shown up despite the cold. Rachel stood in the hallway outside the performance room, clutching her hands together, knuckles white. She could hear the soft murmur of the audience filtering through the walls. Laughter, shifting chairs, the buzz of anticipation that made the air feel tighter than it should. Ivy twirled beside her in her corduroy dress, humming a made-up harmony and practicing her "Thank You Bow." Micah paced slowly, reading and rereading their printed lyrics, even though he already knew them by heart. Noah tuned his guitar in a corner, methodical as ever, but his eyes kept drifting to Rachel. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. Eli approached and gently tugged on her sleeve. He offered her a folded piece of paper, the same one he'd drawn the family on. This time, he had added a small sun rising behind them. Rachel's eyes glistened. Then came the knock on the door. "You're up," said a volunteer teen in a headset. "You're the first act." They stepped into the room together. Noah first, guitar slung low, flannel sleeves rolled to the elbow. His boots echoed softly on the wooden stage. Then Micah and Ivy, hand in hand, side by side, like twin lights. Eli followed, sketchpad tucked under his arm, stepping softly. Rachel came last. She didn't shrink. She didn't hurry. She walked like someone carrying something precious, not heavy, but sacred. The murmuring in the crowd quieted. No introduction, no announcement, just the soft clearing of a throat and the first keystroke from the piano. Rachel began to play. The first chords of the sound between us drifted through the room like sunlight spilling through dusty windows. Soft, slow, familiar. Noah joined in after the fourth measure. 2 chords on the downbeat, warm and earthy. His fingers knew the path now, and they trusted it. Micah and Ivy stepped forward on cue. Their voices weren't trained or polished, but they were real. Micah's was steady, like a spoken truth. Ivy's wavered, then blossomed, high and clear. Rachel's voice entered next. Not loud, not sharp, just honest. And then, halfway through the second chorus, Eli stepped forward. He didn't sing. He didn't need to. He turned his sketchpad to the crowd, showing page after page of drawings he'd made in the silence. Each one matched the verses as they passed. A piano in an empty room. A mother staring at snow through a cracked window. A boy holding a toolbox. 3 kids and 1 man laughing around a dinner table. A cabin with light pouring from every window. The crowd leaned in. They weren't just hearing the song, they were seeing it. Rachel played the bridge like a prayer. "I don't need loud to feel heard," she sang, her voice trembling on the second line. Noah stepped closer. Just someone to stay through silence. Their harmony blended, like they'd always belonged in the same melody. Micah and Ivy joined in for the final chorus. Eli held up. The last sketch, a circle of 5 figures. No names, no captions, just connected hands. In the middle, he had written, "We are not broken. We are unfinished songs." And when the last note fell, silence. Not the awkward kind. The holy kind. No one moved. No one clapped. Not for a breath. Maybe 2, and then thunder. Applause erupted from every corner. Not polite. Not performative. reverent. Some stood, others wept. One man in the back, a retired choir teacher, took off his glasses and just pressed his hands over his chest. Rachel stood frozen, blinking through the light. Micah let out a slow breath. Ivy whispered, "Did we do it?" Noah said, "We did more than do it." Eli smiled, not wide, but proud. Backstage, a flurry of congratulations greeted them. Parents hugged them. Teenagers who had never said a word to Micah in school told him his voice gave them chills. Ivy got a sticker from a preschool teacher who said, "I hope my students grow up to sing like you." One woman stepped forward. Mid-40s, soft sweater, watery eyes. She looked at Rachel. "My daughter hasn't spoken in 6 months," she said. "We didn't know what else to try. But your song." I saw her mouth the words. Rachel's hand flew to her chest. "I just wanted you to know," the woman added. "Your silence turned someone else's light back on." Noah touched Rachel's shoulder. She didn't speak. She just nodded. That night, back at the cabin, no one rushed to change out of their stage clothes. No one turned on the TV. They sat around the fire, hands curled around cocoa mugs, blankets draped over laps, the USB drive resting on the mantel like a small, sacred monument. Ivy yawned. "We should make more songs." Micah nodded. "We've got stories, and chords, and feelings." Noah laughed. "That's a dangerous mix." Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a new drawing. It was the same 5 figures, but now they were singing. Rachel looked around the room, not at what she'd lost, but at what she'd found. And in her heart, she whispered, "Let the world hear this," because now she was no longer afraid to be seen. It started with a shaky phone video. Someone in the 3rd row, probably a teenager with a cracked screen and zero intention of going viral, had recorded the entire performance. No flashy edits, no filters, just raw footage. Rachel's hands. On the piano, Noah's steady guitar, Micah and Ivy's voices, and Eli's sketches, held up one by one like a story unfolding. They posted it with a simple caption. They called themselves "The Sound Between Us." I've never felt music like this. By morning, the video had 3,000 views. By the end of the week, it had over 100,000. Rachel found out through a friend of a friend who messaged her on Facebook. "Is this you?" The message read, followed by the link and 6 crying face emojis. She clicked it and watched in silence. The video was grainy. Ivy's voice cracked once. The light flickered. Eli's sketches were barely visible. And yet, the comments. "I've never cried at a talent show performance. Until now. My son is nonverbal." This gave me hope again. I didn't even know I needed healing. But this healed something in me. Who are these people? They just saved my Tuesday. Rachel scrolled and scrolled until her hands trembled. Noah walked in from the workshop holding a box of mismatched nails when he saw her sitting at the table, laptop open, tears in her eyes. He dropped the box and rushed over. "What happened?" She just turned the screen toward him. Noah blinked. Then again, "Is that us?" Rachel nodded. "We're on the internet?" She laughed through her tears. "We're everywhere, apparently." The local news station called 2 days later. Then a podcast host from Ohio, a music therapy group in Oregon, reached out asking permission to share the performance in a training session. Even a small record label, obscure, niche, but real, emailed, asking if they had more songs. Rachel printed every message and placed them in a folder titled The Echo. It sat on the kitchen counter like a new family album. Micah flipped through it over breakfast. We're, like, famous? Noah shook his head. Not famous, just heard. Ivy pointed at a note from a woman in Texas. She said she played our song during her cancer treatment, that it made the chemo room feel less scary. Rachel put a hand to her mouth. Eli, quiet as ever, stood and went to his room. He returned with a single-page drawing, a figure with headphones on, floating above a swirl of music, their eyes closed and a tear gently falling from one cheek. He titled it, "She Heard Us." With all the attention came questions. Would they release more music? Were they performing again? Would they consider a tour? Noah sat on the porch swing one evening, guitar on his lap, staring out at the trees, while Rachel joined him with a thermos of tea and a furrowed brow. "Do we want this?" she asked. He strummed once. Let it fade. "Do you want this?" Rachel looked out at the clearing. "I want what we made to matter," she said. "But I don't want to lose us in the process." Noah nodded slowly. "We didn't build this to impress anyone. We built it to survive. And sometimes, survival becomes a song other people need." She smiled faintly. "We just have to protect it, like a fire. Feed it, but don't let it burn too hot." Noah looked at her. "Then we protect it. Together." That weekend, they held a small gathering at the cabin. Not a concert. Just a circle of folding chairs, cocoa, and quiet faces. Neighbors, friends. A couple who drove in from 2 towns over after seeing the video online. They called it a listening night. No microphones, no pressure. Just the family, performing, in their own living room, surrounded by strangers who already knew them by heart. Ivy introduced each song like a miniature MC. Micah kept the lyrics on standby. Rachel and Noah sat side by side, piano and guitar, like bookends to a story still being written. Eli didn't draw that night. He just listened and smiled. After the last note faded, and the group sat in reverent quiet, one woman stood and asked, "Do you think you'll keep going? Make more music? Maybe even tour?" Rachel looked around the room, at her children, at Noah, at the firelight warming the walls. "We didn't mean to start a journey," she said softly. "We just meant to make a memory." Then she looked at Eli. He gave the smallest nod. "But maybe it's time," she added, "to see where the song takes us next." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the cabin returned to its normal hush, Noah found Rachel in the hallway, staring at the piano. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just listening." "To what?" She turned, eyes gentle. "To everything we couldn't hear before." 2 weeks after the listening night, the letter arrived. It wasn't digital, not a DM or email, just a cream-colored envelope, stamped in gold foil, slid carefully between utility bills and a pizza flyer. Rachel turned it over in her hands, 3 times before opening it. Inside was a single page, the Evergreen State Gala of the Arts Annual Celebration of Musical Healing and Community Impact. The invitation was personal. Someone had seen their winter showcase video and nominated them for a live performance slot at the gala in Seattle. Front row audience of musicians, therapists, educators, and media. Fully funded. Hotel, travel, everything. It wasn't local. It wasn't safe. It was big. Rachel read the letter twice, then walked it out to Noah in the shed. He was fixing the handle on a drawer that had been sticking since 1997. She handed him the paper and watched his face shift from curiosity to concern to something else. "They want us to perform there?" he asked. Rachel nodded. "The whole family. Same song. Seattle's a long way." "I know." He glanced toward the cabin, where Ivy was coloring by the window, and Micah was tuning his homemade harmonica. "You thinking of saying yes?" he asked. "I'm thinking. I'm scared." Noah put down his tools. "Then let's sit with that." That night, they held a family vote, one of those hand-raise-if-you're-in moments that felt like the kind of thing real families do on TV. Rachel laid out everything honestly. The travel, the stage, the pressure, the hotel beds that might smell strange, the audience that wouldn't know their story. Then she asked, "Do we want to do this?" Micah raised his hand first. "I want to see what else the world sounds like." Then Ivy, with both hands in the air. "We might meet a real fairy godmother." Eli nodded, then added a small thumbs up. All eyes turned to Rachel. She looked at Noah. He said nothing, but he raised his hand too. And so she did the same. The days that followed were chaotic in quiet ways. Rachel made packing lists with more highlighters than strictly necessary. She checked weather forecasts, bought new socks, found Eli a better sketch pad for long car rides. Micah downloaded road trip playlists. Ivy practiced introductions in the mirror. Noah tuned the guitar like a ritual. But beneath the excitement was something heavier. Rachel began waking at 2 a.m., heart racing. What if they weren't ready? What if the silence returned mid-song? What if, in a room full of the real artists, they simply didn't belong? Noah found her in the kitchen one night, forehead pressed to the cool of the fridge. "I feel like I'm walking out without my skin on," she whispered. He wrapped his arms around her. "You're not leaving anything behind. You're bringing everything with you, even the fear." The day they left, the sun rose lazy and golden over Pine Grove. They packed the old van like pilgrims. Ivy hugged the porch post. Goodbye. Micah made sure to carry the USB drive like it was holy. Eli wore his sketchbook strapped to his chest like armor. And Rachel? She stood on the edge of the yard, eyes on the trees, and whispered, "Thank you." To the woods, to the silence, to the place that rebuilt her. The drive to Seattle was long. Ivy counted clouds. Micah DJ'd from the passenger seat. Eli sketched rest stops and bridges. Rachel stared out the window in stretches, processing, remembering, preparing. Noah drove with one hand on the wheel and one on the rhythm of the road. It wasn't just miles they crossed. It was time. It was fear. It was the idea that you are allowed to grow bigger than the grief that once defined you. The hotel was enormous, all glass and chrome and dizzying ceilings. The room had 2 queen beds, a pull-out couch, and a view of a skyline that flickered with promise. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed that first night, wringing her hands, whispering the lyrics under her breath until her voice steadied. Micah stood by the window. "You think they'll like us?" "I think," she said slowly, "we have to sing for the ones who already do." At rehearsal the next day, they stood on a stage that swallowed the space around them. There were lights. There were sound techs. There were seats stretching into darkness. Rachel's breath caught when she looked out. Noah stepped beside her, touched her elbow gently. "Hey." She looked up. "Close your eyes," he said. She obeyed. "Now picture the porch, the fire, the couch where Ivy fell asleep mid-verse, Eli drawing by the window. Micah tapping rhythms on cereal boxes. That's the audience. She opened her eyes and smiled. That night, in the hotel lobby, a woman approached, older, elegant, quiet. She introduced herself as Dr. Layla Graham, a music therapist who'd spent 3 decades using song to reach patients in the darkest moments of their lives. "I watched your showcase video," she said to Rachel, "and I wept." Rachel's eyes filled. "You gave voice to something we can't teach in degrees," the woman said. "You reminded people that music isn't about skill, it's about truth." Then she placed a soft hand on Rachel's arm. "Don't be afraid to let them hear it again." The Evergreen State Gala of the Arts was held inside a hall that shimmered like starlight had been stitched into its ceiling. Crystal fixtures glowed softly overhead, casting warm halos onto the rows of polished mahogany chairs. Hundreds of guests gathered, dressed in gowns, pressed suits, and tailored jackets. Not pretentious, but purposeful. These were people who understood art as more than entertainment. For them, it was oxygen. Rachel stood backstage, frozen. Noah gently adjusted the high D mic stand in front of her, quietly humming a few chords from the bridge of their song. Micah and Ivy were seated beside their instruments, nervously swinging their feet. Eli, already sketching in his lap, paused only to look up when Rachel's breathing quickened. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't panicked. She was remembering. The diagnosis. The nights curled up in a hospital chair. The snow melting on Noah's porch the day she collapsed. The moment Ivy coughed up blood. The silence after Jeremy died. All of it had somehow led here, to a grand room filled with strangers. Rachel wiped the corner of her eye and whispered, "I'm scared this will make it all real. Like, once we sing, we can't go back to the quiet, where it was just us." Noah stepped forward and placed his palm over hers. "Then, let's make sure the song carries the quiet with it." Their names were called. The MC, a soft-voiced poet, introduced them as a family born through music and rebuilt through grace. The room quieted. Footsteps echoed as they crossed the long walk to center stage. The piano sat waiting. The key mic hummed softly. The sketch stand for Eli had been set exactly as requested. Rachel looked out into the sea of faces, then down at Ivy's hand in hers. "Ready?" she whispered. Ivy smiled. "We've been ready since the living room." The first notes rang out soft and familiar. Rachel's fingers moved like they were writing a letter to someone she once lost. Noah's chords built around hers like shelter. Eli flipped to the first page of his sketchbook, showing a drawing of a cabin surrounded by tall pines. Beneath it, "We began in the quiet." Micah's voice joined with a line so pure, a woman in the second row gasped. Then Ivy, eyes closed, sang the next verse, like she was lighting a lantern inside herself. Rachel's voice trembled once, then steadied. They reached the bridge. "I don't need loud to feel heard." Noah sang beside her. "Just someone to stay through silence." Eli lifted the final drawing. 5 figures holding hands, standing inside a circle of sound that looked like wind and light. At the center, a single phrase. "This is the sound between us." Silence followed the final chord, the kind of silence that holds its breath. Then, applause, rising, sustained, echoing through the vaulted space like thunder on holy ground. Some stood, some wept. A few whispered prayers they hadn't planned on saying. Rachel's eyes welled. She bowed once, deeply. Ivy curtsied, Micah grinned so wide his voice cracked when he tried to thank the crowd. Noah simply nodded, hand resting on Rachel's shoulder. Eli raised his sketch pad one last time, not for the audience, but for them. It was a drawing of their family, standing, backstage, bathed in light. He'd titled it, After the Song. Backstage, a dozen people waited to speak with them. A teacher who ran a music program for refugee children. A social worker who wanted to share their story with families healing from loss. A man who had lost his wife 3 years earlier and hadn't been able to listen to music since, until now. They didn't see the Clark Keller family as performers. They saw them as reminders that healing doesn't always come in hospitals, that survival isn't always loud, that broken things can still sing. Later, in the hotel room, they sat on the carpet, backs against the bed, eating takeout from paper containers. Noah passed a fortune cookie to Rachel. She cracked it open and read aloud, "Your story is the key to someone else's survival." Micah blinked. "Okay, that's spooky," Ivy whispered. "I think the cookie heard us sing." Eli quietly slipped the tiny paper into his sketchbook, taping it next to a drawing of a phoenix made of music notes. Rachel leaned her head against Noah's shoulder. He looked down at her. "What now?" he asked. She smiled. "We keep singing." Coming home should have felt like stepping back into something smaller, but it didn't. The moment the van rolled past the pine ridge and crunched down the gravel driveway, something had changed. Not the cabin itself, but the air around it. It felt full, like the house had been waiting for them, and now it breathed easier knowing they'd returned. Inside, everything was just as they left it. The dusty boots by the door, the faint smell of cedar and cocoa, Ivy's drawing taped to the fridge. Yet, nothing was the same, because now the world had heard them. The first week back, the mail doubled. Handwritten letters poured in from states they'd never visited. Missouri, Maine, Montana. Strangers poured their hearts into folded paper, thanking them for giving sound to the spaces grief left behind. A boy in Oklahoma wrote, "I played your video for my dad. He's been quiet since Mom passed. After the song ended, he just said, 'Me too.' Thank you for breaking that silence." A nursing home director asked for permission to show their performance once a week. A principal from a school in Ohio offered to fly them out to perform for a district-wide student mental health day. Rachel sorted every envelope into a box labeled Echoes. Micah read them out loud after dinner. Ivy insisted on replying to each with crayon-drawn thank you cards. Eli, as always, drew something for every letter: a bird, a song, a home. Noah found himself waking early again, not from grief, but purpose. He kakiti, repaired the broken bench behind the cabin, added another coat of paint to the shed. Every plank he hammered felt less like patching up the past and more like preparing for something ahead. Rachel caught him one morning installing a small wooden sign by the porch. It read, "This house hears." She ran her fingers over the carving and whispered, "We should start hosting workshops, music therapy circles, even if it's just 5 people at a time." Noah nodded. Healing doesn't need a stadium, but not every arrival brought comfort. One afternoon, just before sundown, Rachel opened the front door to find a man she hadn't seen in over 4 years, Jeremy's brother, Caleb. He looked older than she remembered, slimmer, wearier, his dark coat too big for his frame. His eyes, though, hadn't changed. Still full of questions. Still unable to hide their grief. "I saw the video," he said. Rachel stood still, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "I wasn't expecting—" "I didn't come to stir anything up," he interrupted gently. "I came because I thought maybe I was finally ready to hear his name again." They sat on the porch in silence for a long while. Inside, Ivy was braiding Noah's hair as a joke. Micah was trying to cook macaroni with far too much pepper. Eli was sketching them through the window. Rachel sipped her tea, her knuckles white. "He would have been proud of you," Caleb finally said. Rachel exhaled shakily. "He didn't get to see me become this version of myself." "No," Caleb said, voice breaking. "But I think he always saw you becoming." Rachel turned to him. "And you? What have you been becoming?" "A man tired of silence," he admitted. They didn't cry. They just sat. And for the first time since Jeremy's funeral, Rachel said his name out loud without flinching. "Jeremy would have loved the kids' song," she whispered, "especially the off-key bridge." Caleb laughed through his nose. He was always tone-deaf. They shared a smile, a real one. Then Caleb stood and placed something on the porch step. It was Jeremy's old guitar pick, worn, cracked, but carried all this way. I figured the song deserved a little piece of him. Rachel took it with both hands. "Thank you," she said, "for letting the music reach you." Later that night, as the fire crackled low and the kids drifted to sleep, Rachel placed the guitar pick on the mantel, right beside the USB stick and Eli's drawing of the five of them. Noah watched, her with quiet reverence. "Do you regret letting the world in?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the window and stared at the moonlight painting silver ribbons across the clearing. Then she said, "No, because letting them in didn't mean losing us. It just meant sharing the warmth." She turned back to him, smiling through tears. "And I think we were always meant to be a fire for someone else." Outside, a breeze rustled the pines. Inside, the house listened and held its breath for what would come next. The envelope was thicker than usual. Rachel stared at it over her morning coffee, the kids still upstairs arguing over sock colors, and Noah outside feeding the birds. The return address read, Lighthouse Arts Foundation. Inside, a formal invitation to headline a 4-city storytelling and music tour, centered on healing through shared narrative. The honor was overwhelming. The opportunity? Life-changing, expenses covered. Media coverage. Full creative freedom. 1 month, 4 stops. Portland, Denver, Minneapolis, and New York. The only question was, could they leave home again? That night, Rachel spread the letter across the dining table. Ivy sat with her cereal bowl balanced on her knees. Micah hovered, pacing slowly as he read every word aloud. Eli sat cross-legged with a pencil tucked behind one ear, sketching something no one could see yet. Noah stood behind Rachel, hand on the back of her chair. "They want all 5 of us," Rachel said. "The full story, the full sound." Micah looked up. "That's amazing, right?" "It is," she replied softly. "But it's not just a show this time. It's time away. It's flights, venues, people we've never met. It's a lot." Ivy leaned forward. "Are we allowed to be scared and excited at the same time?" Noah chuckled. "That's how you know it matters." The next few days were filled with quiet consideration. They didn't rush. They didn't decide with logic. They let the house speak to them. Rachel watched the way Ivy practiced harmonies in the backyard with birds for an audience. She listened to Micah recording voice notes on the porch, like he was already composing the next song. She noticed how Eli's drawings shifted. Less of the cabin, more of stages, cities, and long winding roads. And Noah? He began building travel cases for their instruments without being asked. That said more than words ever could. Still, doubt crept in. One afternoon, Rachel found herself staring at the shelf of keepsakes in the hallway. Eli's first sketchbook, a tiny pair of shoes Ivy had outgrown, Jeremy's pick. She whispered aloud, "What if leaving breaks us?" Behind her, a small voice answered, "What if staying keeps us hidden?" It was Micah. He stepped beside her. "We've been the light in this place, but maybe there are other rooms that need lighting up." Rachel turned to him, eyes misting. "How'd you get so wise?" Micah shrugged. "I'm homeschooled." They invited their closest friends and neighbors for a bonfire before deciding. As the flames danced, they passed around cocoa and played old recordings on a portable speaker. Rachel shared the offer. The crowd listened quietly. Then came one voice, a PT woman who had shown up to every listening night since the first. "If your music helped me," she said softly, "imagine who else it can reach." Another man added, "Sometimes staying is brave, but so is going." They weren't giving permission. They were giving blessing. And that made all the difference. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel and Noah sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the last embers of the fire smolder. "Are we doing this?" Noah asked. Rachel didn't speak right away. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded tour letter. Then, gently, she lit one corner of the envelope in the flame of the lantern beside them. Noah's eyes widened. "What are you—" Rachel stopped him with a smile. "Just the envelope," she said. "We're done reading it. Now it's time to start writing our own version." She stood and walked inside. Noah followed, and on the kitchen table, waiting patiently, was a fresh notebook, blank pages ready to hold their next chapter. Eli had drawn on the first page without being asked. A road winding through 4 cities. At E, the end of the path, a stage, 5 silhouettes standing together, hand in hand. Above it, in tiny cursive script, not the end, just the echo reaching further. The first stop was Portland. The stage was inside a community center, walls lined with paper cranes folded by children in therapy. There were no rows of velvet seats, just mats, beanbags, folding chairs. The audience was small. Some wore hospital bracelets. A few came with grief in their eyes and hope clutched tightly in trembling hands. The family sang without microphones. Rachel's voice trembled once. Ivy's shoes squeaked against the linoleum. Micah forgot a lyric and improvised. Eli showed sketches taped to poster board, drawings of broken things being mended. When they finished, a young girl walked to the front and whispered, "That felt like someone opened a window in my chest." Rachel knelt beside her. "That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like." Denver was bigger. An old church turned concert hall. Soft light pooled through stained glass, painting every note in color. The family performed alongside other survivors, artists who'd turned trauma into tapestry. The audience clapped in time. They cried together. Someone shouted, "Encore!" and Ivy giggled mid-curtsy. Afterward, an elderly man in a veteran's cap approached. He said nothing. He just placed a patch from his unit on the stage, tapped his heart, and left. Micah held it like gold. Noah framed it that night in the hotel. Minneapolis brought snow and questions. A local reporter interviewed them between sets. "What makes your family's story resonate so deeply?" Rachel looked into the lens. "Because we never sang to impress. We sang to survive. And we survived so others might feel they could too." The segment aired the same night. Thousands watched. But what mattered most? A woman in the audience found them after the show, tears sliding down her cheeks. I haven't spoken to my son in 5 years, she said. Tonight I texted him. Let's start again. Then she added, You didn't just sing. You reminded me that I'm still here. New York felt like a dream. The venue was a black box theater, tucked in the corner of a city that never slowed down. And yet, for 70 minutes, everything did. The family's music stopped strangers on subway stairs. Their story made its way to a podcast. One night, Ivy got recognized at a bakery. You're the little girl who sings like sunlight, a woman said, eyes misting. Ivy beamed. Sometimes I cry when I sing, she admitted. The woman nodded. That's how I know it's real. They returned home at dusk. The pine trees greeted them with their usual hush. The cabin windows glowed faintly, welcoming them back not like travelers, but like heroes returning from a battle only they knew they'd fought. Inside, everything was exactly where they left it. And yet, they weren't the same. Rachel stood in the living room for a long time, hand brushing the piano's edge. Noah unpacked the guitar case slowly, almost reverently. His fingers paused on the old neck, on the worn pick Jeremy's brother had returned. Micah wandered outside, headphones in, and looked up at the stars like they were singing back. Ivy curled up on the couch and pulled her sketchbook to her chest. Instead of a pillow, Eli wandered quietly into the hallway. He returned with a new drawing. No cityscapes this time, just the cabin, bathed in golden light. Above it, in soft lettering, everything we needed was already here. Over the next weeks, life returned to rhythm, not smaller, just quieter. Letters continued to arrive. People visited. Music therapy students asked if they could observe how a family made grief beautiful. Rachel started writing again. Songs, essays, pages of gratitude. Noah planted 2 new trees behind the cabin. One for Jeremy, one for Caleb, who now called every Sunday. The kids helped, their laughter carrying through the woods like a hymn. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, they hosted their first official song circle. 10 guests, blankets, hot tea, candles flickering. They didn't perform. They listened. Each person shared a memory they'd kept locked away too long. One man talked about losing his brother to overdose. A woman played a scratchy voicemail from her grandmother. The last time I heard her sing, Rachel ended the night with a single line. You don't have to sing in tune. You just have to sing in truth. And everyone understood. That night, after the fire dimmed and the guests had gone, Rachel and Noah stood on the porch, watching the stars. You know, Rachel said, I thought we were saving each other. We did, Noah replied. She smiled. But I didn't know how many others we'd end up saving too. Noah looked at her, eyes soft. That's what happens when you open the door. Rachel leaned into him, quiet and full. Inside, Eli tacked one final sketch on the living room wall. A wide-open door, a song spilling out like light, 5 shadows standing in the threshold, not waiting, welcoming. Underneath, one final phrase. Home is not where the song ends. It's where it echoes forever.